Well, these guys have brothers. I don't have brothers, so this is as close to brothers as I've ever had. And it is fun. I mean, I think we know how far we can go with one another and where we need to draw the line. And, we try never to go down paths where there's no exit. But, sometimes you have to tiptoe a little bit.
Through the tulips. I've done that a few times. I just think that it makes our broadcast more of a conversation, and we can be focused on baseball and be serious about baseball, but also lighthearted. And I think the people out there like it and gravitated to it. And we've lasted 18 years.
I have a great relationship with my brothers, but they're three younger brothers, so my relationship with them is a little different. And although you guys are about the same age as I am, you're a little older.
We're older.
A little older.
You can say it, we're older.
But a little older. But it's like I have older brothers, the older brothers that I never had when I was growing up.
That's going to be Wainwright for the Cardinals.
Odorizzi, maybe?
Odorizzi, you're right. Did you just say it, Gary? Did you say it? I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. How many times have I done that over our 17 years?
You're watching and you are feeling like you are privy to a conversation with A, two of the great players in Mets history, and B, one of the greatest broadcasters of our generation, but three guys who at their core are just three really good friends who love talking about the game and about their lives to each other.
Three-man booths are tricky. You could take three excellent broadcasters. They're excellent on their own terms. That doesn't necessarily mean that it would click. It's like putting a team together. You want good individual talent, but the team has to gel, and that team gels.
It's always been the case, Ronnie. You sit in the middle and Keith sits on the right.
Yeah.
When you're gone, he moves closer.
I do.
When he's gone, you move further.
Oh, I can't get, I try to get up against the wall.
What's that about?
I love you, Gary. We just have such a small booth. It's nice to have the room for a change.
Next stadium, it'll be bigger.
We all know that we have our own areas of expertise, and it doesn't break down as simply as Gary does the play-by-play, Keith does the hitter, and Ronnie does the pitcher. It's more nuanced than that.
That was initially how we stayed away from talking over each other. But I think what we do now is that, how they say twins kind of finish each other's sentences, and they have this kind of opaque language between each other. I think we have that with us three, is that we just really, at some point, know what the other is thinking, where he's going, how can we add to what they're saying, or to be quiet if they've made such a definitive point that there's nowhere to go.
And welcome to the new Shea Stadium, the new home of the Mets, to be ready for the opening day of the 1964 season.
When I was a kid growing up in Queens, my goal was to be the shortstop for the Mets. It was a fairly far-fetched dream, and it had no chance of becoming reality because I had no talent. I would have suspected at that time that becoming a broadcaster for the Mets was just as far-fetched.
Every organization kind of has their themes, and the Mets theme, one of their themes, and it's a big theme, is they've had really good announcers.
I'm Lindsey Nelson at Miller Huggins Field in St. Petersburg, Florida, where the New York Mets are in the midst of their very first spring training season. We'll be doing 136 games for WOR-TV Channel 9 in New York.
Lindsey Nelson, Bob Murphy, and Ralph Kiner deserve extra credit for making the Mets interesting and entertaining at the beginning when they were god-awful. They went from absolute laughingstocks to winning the World Series in 1969, which made them even more interesting. The Miracle Mets, that's a specific team that stands out in Major League history. So everyone that grew up as a Met fan has affection not just for Tom Seaver and Cleon Jones. They have affection for Lindsey, Bob, and Ralph.
Lindsey, Bob, and Ralph worked together between 1962 and 1978 inclusive. So that's 17 seasons. Having been in my eyes and ears for the better part of 7 months, really, when you count spring training, of every year, felt like family.
They were the soundtrack of my youth. They were the Mets sound of the summer. Those guys started Mets broadcasting from scratch. There was no Mets history when they began. They made Mets history.
He struck him out! Struck him out! The Mets have won the World Series! The dream has come true. The Mets have won the World Series, coming from behind to win the 7th ball game.
I did not watch any baseball from the day I retired until the home run chase. I was injured. I couldn't play like I used to be able to play. I knew I was finished. So it kind of ended on a bad note. So I just had to get away from the game. It was good for me. I just sat around and really just putzed around New York, Manhattan for like 6 years until this came around.
I call it the blackout period. Gary always mentions it on the air. It's about 5 years as well. We all get betrayed by the calendar. We all end up not being very good at the end. And I don't know if it's embarrassment, maybe. And 4 or 5 years later, you come back to it, and everyone has this eureka experience. I forgot how much I love baseball. And that's the reason I played it. I love it.
I was approached by a young agent at Elaine's in '98, and he asked me if he said I should, he's a Met fan, he said I should be in the booth. And I didn't want to do that, and he kept pestering me because we exchanged numbers. And finally I said, okay, go ahead and pitch it and go to Doubleday. It was Nelson was the main owner then.
I remember when I first started doing TV, I was like, does everyone sweat like this? I mean, it would be cold in the room, I'd be sweating. It'd be hot, I'd be sweating. I spoke really fast, really fast.
They really have to be happy that they are where they are despite all the problems that they have.
I never intended to be on television. It was always my intention to stay on radio, and it was only the emergence of SNY as an entity that convinced me otherwise, that I could start from the ground floor with a TV outlet that was broadcasting Mets games. I knew the subject matter was just a matter of adjusting to the medium.
Good news for the guys we're going to join right now as we kick off the Mets pregame live portion of Baseball Night in New York. Gary Cohen, Keith Hernandez join us from Port St. Lucie, Florida. Hello, gentlemen. You've been around this team for a long time, both of you.
Oh, God.
Jesus.
Oh, my God, like a deer in the headlights.
It's great to be here. And Sportsnet New York hits the air tonight here in Port St. Lucie. It's a gorgeous night for baseball. The Mets playing the Atlanta Braves. And Keith, what a great way to start.
Well, it's a wonderful way to start with the arch rival Braves, of course.
I think the 2006 season helped because it was such a good season. The team was really good. They played a lot of great baseball over the summer. And I don't know, I think it inspired all of us to do our best.
Well, you had the 1 year in Washington under your belt. I have been doing like 20 games for MSG, and Fran Healy in his contract got to do the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, so I just did the first 5 innings and I went home. I was like Phil Rizzuto. I was happy. Gary came over for radio, and we had an interesting spring training, and I don't think it took very long.
I remember one thing that happened early in the first season. I don't even remember if it was spring training or if it was during the regular season. But, I have a tendency to prod you a little bit and to, tease you and push you. And that's kind of part of our thing.
Not physically.
No, I meant verbally. And I remember early on in the season asking you, are you okay with that? Are you okay with me
pushing,
jibing you? And you said, yeah, do whatever. And I think that gave us the freedom to just freelance the way we do.
Well, apparently the first pictures of Keith's recovery are in.
It was a little more serious than we thought.
Well, happy recovery, friend.
Gary, Keith, and Ron, this is one of the most exciting moments of my life. If only that were true. That's right. To be here in the Hall of Fame. This is the Hall of Fame, too. These guys are all going to be in the Hall of Fame as broadcasters.
So the kids are making their way up to the upper deck, and we figured, well, what the heck? We'll do that too. And so Ron and Keith and I set up right behind home plate in the upper deck at Shea.
pleasant good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the upper deck at Shea Stadium. Gary Cohen, Ron Darling, Keith Hernandez.
That was my dream, was to do a game from up there.
I had a short hair.
We're out amongst the people, and that's perfect for you, Keith.
Oh, absolutely. This can be dangerous here. And Gary and I and Ron, we're very popular. We're mobbed by the...
The most important part of my job is to be the representative of the fans in the booth. That's where I come from. I grew up in the upper deck at Shea Stadium. I knew, and I think I still know, how Met fans think. There's a fatalism, but there's a joy and there's a commitment that's involved in being a Mets fan.
I think Gary has the essential elements of history. He knows the history of the team. He has the trust and actually the fondness of his viewers and listeners because he's one of them, in a sense. He's very professional, but you know he's a Met fan, and that comes out in the big moments. He's a Met fan before he ever became a broadcaster.
I'm supposed to be the team historian. He knows 1,000 times more about the Mets than I do. I would go to tell him something when I was traveling in regular PR, because he already knew it. I mean, he's just, from his childhood, growing up in Queens, following the Mets 69 World Series, he knew everything about everything.
Like a warm Rays sweater. He is comfort food for me without the calories. I'm very happy to listen to him no matter what the Mets are doing. He provides solace in the worst times and joy in the best times.
To left field, Floyd. And after running roughshod over the National League, the Mets have a title to show for it. 2006 National League East champions.
I think I probably have more in common with Gary than I do with Keith in a strange way. When we first started this job, when we'd go out to dinner, I realized, boy, he thinks about a lot of things like I think about. It was an easy friendship because I just felt like I was with someone that I would hang out with even if I wasn't working with him.
I'm coming in there as a new guy, and Gary is the Mets, and he was so welcoming and helpful every single second and chance that he got. He probably mentored me more than he even realized. And for a guy who grew up idolizing him, it just meant the world.
He is a master of language, of descriptions in a way that you don't even realize because it comes so naturally. His ability to, like that, describe something so perfectly, it's like a great artist. There's 12, 13, 14 different ways that just with his voice he can convey what's going on in a game.
He struck him out! It has happened! In their 51st season, Johan Santana has thrown the first no-hitter in New York Mets history. Lindor against Cleveland gets the winning hit, and the Mets win 10-9. Oh, wow!
I see those videos from the booth cam, and I don't really necessarily know that person, but it's people have to understand it's not celebrating, it's not rooting, it's punching the words is really what it is.
First time Gary made the double home run call. It's out of here. It always was, it's out of here, and that was it. It was a dramatic home run early, and Gary did a double. It's out of here, it's out of here. I would have looked at him. That's the first time I noticed.
He whips it to deep right. That ball is out of here! Out of here! The Mets win the ball game!
I think sometimes when Gary really punches it, Keith and I just look at each other like, wow, what a call that was. But I guess like athletes, like some of the things I did on the field, I can't believe that that's me. That's how I can act occasionally. But the key is, and Keith alluded to it, is that Gary is the greatest at what he does is because he knows when to punch it.
Malone looking for his first hit of the year.
He drives one, deep left field. Back goes Upton, back near the wall. It's out of here! Bartolo has done it! The impossible has happened!
I've worked with a lot of different announcers at a lot of different networks. I've never worked with somebody who prepares more diligently and is more thorough than Gary Cohen.
Maniacal in his preparation. Every day, he makes sure to read every game story from the AP around Major League Baseball. And to do that on top of the daily work that it takes to know every player, every coach on the teams in front of you, I honestly don't know how he has the stamina. I really don't.
Never wavers. There's never a half effort. There's never a B- effort. It's A+ every single game. He's taught me a lot about how to prepare, so I've kind of modeled how I prepare after him.
His knowledge of the Mets, his knowledge of baseball, the whole grand picture, past and present, how he orchestrates the game, his intellect. I think he's the best play-by-play guy there is, and he makes Ronnie and I so much better. I've always said he's the backbone of the broadcast. He's the Leonard Bernstein. We're just one section of the orchestra, and he brings us in, weaves us in and out, and he's a master at it.
Chasing Nimmo back to the warning track, right at the fence. He made the catch! Oh, wow! The catch of the year from Brandon Nimmo!
You know, a lot of those videos, and I've seen people comment on them, they say, oh, Gary's all enthusiastic, and Keith and Ron are sitting there just doing bookkeeping. Well, they're doing their job. They're getting ready to add the next thing and thinking about how they're going to enhance the play after it's over. So just be aware.
One of the ways you're a professional broadcaster, when you have such a great play-by-play guy, is he makes this great call. Keith and I's first thing we have to do is shut up.
Exactly.
And let it lay.
Let the pitcher tell the story. Play-by-play guy makes the call. It's a home run or whatever. It's the noise of the crowd, the moment. Don't step into it. And then wait and be silent.
No steppage.
No steppage.
When I first started, I was a pretty young man, and it was incomprehensible to me that I would even have this job. 35 years later, it's still a little mind-boggling that I've spent more than half my life broadcasting Mets baseball, which I grew up rooting for. I've been incredibly lucky to be put in the position of being that lottery winner who gets to call Mets games.
I know that he probably thinks he never thought when he was in the upper tank watching those Met games, when the Mets weren't so grand, that he would have been in the booth doing radio, and then TV, and then all of a sudden, little old Gary is in the Mets Hall of Fame here.
I am just a kid from Queens. I got lucky. I am one of you. And I share this honor with all of you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
When you think about a musician's body of work, you don't think about one riff or one lick in a single song. You think about the whole song, the whole album. That's the way I think of this job. It's not about the one moment. It's about the 500 hours a year that we are in people's living rooms.
With rare exceptions, the memories of great players fade a bit with the passage of time. But Ron and Keith are still present. They're very present. They've been Met broadcasters much longer than they were players for the Mets. But this matters too. They were part of legendary Met teams in the 80s. That team was so vivid and so colorful in the 1980s, and they're both part of it.
Fastball hit into left center field, base hit, 3-2 Boston.
The night of Game 7, Keith and I went to a restaurant bar, Columbus, on Columbus Avenue, that we used to go to all the time. And we got there, and I remember it was, this is such a name drop, but Robert De Niro, his son Raphael, I believe, my mother, Mike Tyson, me, my dad. Keith and I hung out in the city because we both lived in the city, but it wasn't until we started doing this job that I got to know him as a man, not a ball player, as a man, and he got to know me as a man, and that's where we became really close friends. Like, I feel a brotherhood kinship to Keith that I didn't feel as a player.
Our relationship has developed more so now. We're a real strong friendship since we've been in the booth. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're not playing anymore. We're not competing. We're not on edge. It's been wonderful. I never would have thought that I would be in the booth, let alone with Ron, and how it's affected in a very positive way. Our friendship has just grown. We were always friends, but I think it's a lot deeper now since we've been, 18 years in the booth.
With players, when they're playing, they're kind of a little bit more reserved in what they talk to the media about. You get the cliche answers, but I almost feel like Ron and Keith now are a little bit unfiltered. Sometimes you'll see Ron picking up a pitcher, tipping off a pitch, and he'll call that out. And you'll see Keith doing the same with a batter who's in a funk and getting under the ball or just a little too late. So you just kind of see their knowledge come through, and then you see them be able to talk more freely than they might have as a player.
1-2 coming. And the slider in there, strike three. Conforto's hit on the pitch.
It hit Conforto. He made no effort to get out of the way. This is a strike, and he gets hit. Look at that. Oh, you can't do that.
They don't give a what anybody thinks. I mean, what sets them apart is that they're going to do what they're going to do. They have strong opinions. They're going to call a game, and they're going to talk about anything from the game in front of them to what Haji had for breakfast, Keith's cat in the morning.
When this network was set up, it was pretty important to Kurt Gowdy Jr., who was our executive producer for a long time, that we have an objective broadcast. We would much prefer the Mets to do well and the Mets to win. But there's also a sense among our group that our credibility is really important, and you're dealing with New York fans, New York viewers, a pretty sophisticated group of people, and they've really come to rely on our, I think, objectivity and ability to be honest.
I root for the Mets. I want them to win. I mean, I would like our broadcast to be just a little bit more, some cheerleading in there, but we're not allowed. We can't do that. Not in this market.
The veteran players now, it's very incumbent on them, Gary, speaking as a former player, for them to take charge in that clubhouse.
I think a lot of broadcasts can be very deferential to the home team, and I think there's certain markets that should happen. We certainly aren't like that. We try to be open-minded. Keith and I do the broadcasts as analysts the same way we played, unfettered, full emotion, and I have no problem with what's left on the table.
You can throw for a strike anytime you want. Next start, you can't find it. So maybe you have to throw your sinker or flip over a curveball or maybe take a little off your fastball or changeup. So it'll change from day to day. That's why, I'm always reluctant to say, okay, this is what you throw best. So every time you're in this tough situation and the you-know-what hits the fan, then go with this. Well, some days you don't have that.
Changeup? You got to be kidding me.
And Wright drives it deep left field, headed toward the wall, and it's out of here! David Wright with a two-run homer, and the Mets take the lead.
My God, changeup on a tee.
I've learned tons about the actual playing of the game from Keith and Ron because they played it at such a high level. I think they've learned from me about how passionate Met fans are and how deep their knowledge goes and their understanding of Mets history.
Since Ron Darling and Keith Hernandez played for the Mets, you've got a connection there that is so different. No matter how good the national broadcast is objectively, local fans can never connect with a network broadcaster the same way they do with their guys.
I admire them growing up, right? I watched the '86 Mets with Keith and Ron on the team. Now you get to know them as, adults, as kind of people with families, and it's just a different level of appreciation for who they are as people, and also their love for the game and the insights that they bring to the game.
Keith and I are World Series champions, and we played for Mets teams when they were probably some of their best teams. But Keith and I grew up watching baseball games. I would ask my dad, could I stay up for the Red Sox Angel game, which didn't start till 10 o'clock at night, and that was, when he said yes, I was the happiest person ever. Keith and I are very cognizant of the fan at home watching the game, how important that game is to them. And I think that's how we try to broadcast. We try to broadcast like we're broadcasting to each of us when we were 10 years old.
I think it's important that we bring in our lives. Like I drove in today, the LIE, I complained for 2 years, it was all full of potholes. Well, people drive in and they know that, so I'm doing the same thing they're doing. You know, I go to the dry cleaners, I go to the grocery store, you know, I mow the lawn or whatever, and I think that's important, that it makes us part of, like, we're all in it together. Because they tend to think that we have this special life, and we don't. We just have a pretty unique job.
Hi there, welcome to Citi Field. Are we Met fans?
Keith, hey.
What's going on, bro?
Nice meeting you, man.
Nice meeting you. You guys look like a truckload of Met fans.
Keith Hernandez.
No. No.
Yes, you
How
are.
are you?
Yes.
I got fired.
Good morning. Rise and shine. I know what you're thinking. Who does this guy think he is? I'm Keith Hernandez, and I hope you have a great day, pretty boy.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow, that's even better than I thought.
Exactly.
Oh, we got to do the Cardinal defense, brought to you by Coors Light. Burgos, I always mispronounce that. I got two new outfielders out there. And I missed the infield, and there's Yachty.
That was awesome. Hey, you got the catcher. It's great. We're all set.
Keith is a free-form jazz aficionado, and you never know where he's going to go.
He is quirky, he is passionate, he is a softie, he can be a tough guy, he is a natural-born leader, yet he follows orders as well as any soldier I've ever encountered. He is a Renaissance man, and he is a caveman. He's all those things rolled into one.
A picture says 1,000 words. I would like to trade places with that guy right there. To be honest with you.
We can send you out there and see just how comfortable those bleachers are.
From my perspective, every time he sighs, or most of the time he sighs, it's a sighable game. There's an honesty that comes from this broadcast because we can't hide anything. You know, we've been in front of you for 18 years, so everything that we do, that we probably do at home, at times comes out in the broadcast.
Well, I have noticed that this year, Keith is sighing less, and I think that might be the most tangible benefit of the new rules.
Those poor college kids can't drink shooters.
That's funny. I do remember the game, though, where Keith set the record for the most size. Yeah. It was the game in St. Louis.
Yes.
The 18-inning game.
The futility game.
And Keith was trending on Twitter that day because he went places that I don't think our broadcaster or any other has ever gone before.
That's when they left all the men on base throughout the game.
You kept asking, Gary, what are they with men on base?
I think it was 0 for 24, but then they won the game.
They won the game.
But there was something there about whiskey and...
No, finally I just said, give me a whiskey. Gosh almighty. I was so... Because we showed the players, and the players they're the ones that are more frustrated. And I'm just frustrated because it's not because I'm angry at the players. It's just that I sense their futility. I want the Mets to win. But I'll say one thing. A lot of times my sighs are just, I'm tired. And it's how I yawn.
He needs his nap.
Sent our own emissary to McCovey Cove, Kevin Burkhardt. Kevin?
Hello, boys. How are you?
Not as wet as you are.
You know, I had to see what it was like to come out here and experience a game in McCovey Cove, so that's what I did. I went out to the kayak shop and paddled out here about an hour before the game. As you can see, I'm drifting like crazy. How about this? Little skill right there.
There's no harder job in our broadcast than being the sideline reporter. You might only get on once or twice a game for 30 seconds, and you have to be ready, and you have to be friendly, and you have to be confident, and you have to know what you're talking about, but you also have to get in and out quickly.
Gary was a huge mentor to me and a great friend. I mean, you know, he probably mentored me more than he even realized. Even when I wasn't asking for it, he would help me out.
Kevin was just a natural for all of us. You know, he's a Jersey guy. It was so easy to like Kevin, and he's just so good at what he did. Every sideline reporter for the rest of time will try to be Kevin Burkhardt.
Kevin said he used to always view the success or failure of a report based on if and how the guys in the booth talked about it afterwards. And I've kind of adopted the same thought on it. If I'm saying something that is interesting enough that the three of them want to keep going with that conversation, whether it includes me or not, if it spurs on something else that they can discuss and make interesting, then I've done my job.
I talked to some people with the Cubs. I said, hey, what's one thing about this ballpark that is really great, but people just don't know about it?
Steve has a lot on his plate, and Kevin had a lot on his plate to go and dig and find interesting things that the fans would enjoy and things that I would enjoy. Steve's always in there in that clubhouse, and he's developed relationships so he can bring content to the broadcast. He's a very, very important part of our broadcast.
Keith and I were on the bus, just the two of us, to Tropicana Field. He said, after the game tonight, can you do some research for me? Because I'm thinking that Tropicana Field reminds me a lot of the old Astrodome. I brought it to Keith before the next day, and he just kept, before the game, he said, I don't have time to look at it right now. And then we were in game. Out of nowhere, Keith just said, Tropicana Field reminds me of the old Astrodome. And Steve actually had some fascinating stuff that he was telling me about it, that he learned the other day. And Steve, what'd you get?
You look up top, you've got the catwalks, you've got the lights, you've got all the wires, and honestly, you got a white ceiling, and what that does is it makes it very difficult to track a baseball if the ball goes up, and it kind of depth perception-wise looks like it's up into that rooftop.
What he was doing was not allowing me to overthink and just trusting that I had done the research and knew what I was doing. And it ended up being a real turning point for me. It was the recognition in my mind of like, he's not going to let me fail. Keith was the captain for a reason, you know? And so I will never, as long as whatever I do in this business, I will never forget that from Keith.
Well, we've had trouble all road trip with this camera, and I'm just really thrilled. And this camera is so swift. No! Everything I touch. How did that happen? Kurt, it's not coming out of my paycheck.
Blowouts, that's where you earn your money. So it was always about just listening to the guys and engaging and adding what I can to either start a conversation, enhance a conversation, or probably at that point make them laugh. Because I knew, like, at some point, if it's 16-1, you know, Braves, Keith's probably like in his chair, like doing this, and who knows what's going on.
Those are the tough ones because we got to hold our audience, particularly if the Mets are down 10-0, and as opposed to being up. So we go into storytelling. We get a little goofy and we have a little more fun, and that's the kind of game that you can also joke around a little bit, but make it more entertaining because it's a blowout.
I think we do our best work when it's really intense, great game, when the players are at their best. But then when there's a real Stinkowski, as Keith says, a bad game, I think we're equally great at entertaining because we deflect what's happening on the field, and we allow you to watch the game that might not be that great that night, but at the same time take you on a little tour of something else.
I think that's where our producer Greg Picker shines. He is incredibly creative and loves the game, knows the game, and he also gets bored. So he tends to push us in creative directions. You know, the reading out of the media guide, the going through the baseball cards, the having the clothesline between the booths during the pandemic. None of it is rehearsed, but all of it comes from a place of love.
You know, if I'm doing my job correctly, I'm communicating with every single person who works on this show in a way that is most beneficial to them as individuals and to us as a collective group. And so because they are different and they do have such different personalities, what I do with each one of them is completely different.
Greg is amazing. He's an amazing communicator. This is kind of a funny story. I remember first he wanted to talk to you about your texting during the broadcast, right? Our first year or second, whatever it was. And he goes, I'm going to tell Keith that I talked to you at length about your texting. I said, I don't text in the booth. He goes, exactly. I don't want him to feel like he's the only one being singled out. I'm going to tell him I talked to you as well. I thought, that's brilliant. You know what I mean? Like communication skills, but also...
Did you know that?
No, I didn't. But I also know one thing. I found out a lot of broadcasters text as well, so I'm not alone.
That's right. He's got a great feel. We have this, the cards, the baseball cards thing we did. I'll never forget the first time we did it. We got a lot of people that were very excited that we did it. And we had the only time we ever would do it is when a blowout game, right?
We've arrived at that point in a 7-0 game where Russ Relkin brings the baseball cards into the booth. And here they are.
Folks, tweet if you're getting sick of us with the baseball cards. We love it, but I understand.
All right, I'm going to go for the old.
You go first.
Just pick one?
No, pick a bunch.
Oh,
Let's
look
go.
what I got. The 1968 World Series star, Mickey Lolich, in a Tigre uniform.
3 wins in that series.
Yes, he did. He beat Gibson in Game 7.
I mean, Denny McClain won 31 that year, but it was Lolich who was the star.
The next time we were going to do it, I don't know, I think you felt the same way, all of us did. He said, okay, break out the cards, doing the cards, and all 3 of us said, I don't feel like doing a card. Not today, Greg, please. And he's like, you're doing the cards. And we all didn't want to do it. We ended up doing it. Probably was one of our best segments with the cards. He just has a great feel for us, for the show, and what's important to make it better.
Because we've worked together for so long and have developed such a great trust of one another, there are many times where we do not share with them what we're going to do. And the reason for that is we're really looking for that spontaneous reaction that we get from the trio.
Usually by this time we've heard about Keith's postseason plans. This year we haven't heard much, so there's an idea.
I'll do that.
Nice shorts.
How about Keith as Elmer Fudd?
That wascally wow. You guys are idiots.
So we've seen a couple of postseason ideas for Keith. How about this? Trimming the hedges?
Oh, Edward Scissorhands.
What's the hat?
Oh, there you go.
There it is.
Nice abs, Keith.
Down in Florida. That's Funny and the Bear.
You hear that genuine laughter from the booth. That is, for me, as the producer of the show, and I know for the other guys who work in production, is very gratifying. And that's really what we strive to be all about.
Gary, Keith, and Ron 18 is presented by your Tri-State Cadillac dealers.
Welcome back to St. Louis, folks, where the Mets are ahead 6-3. We referenced earlier that Gary had a photo in his wallet with his long hair back in his Columbia days. Now, folks.
That looks like it's a Yale Bowl.
I want to ask this question.
Riverside Park.
I'm dead serious. For you women out there and your men, if your daughter brought home this man, would you let him in the door? That's a text poll.
I think he looks fantastic.
It's a different lifetime.
You know, Kurt Gowdy said something to me once that made sense, was that Ronnie and I played team sports. So we know how to work as a team. And he thought that was, he said his concern was just that there would be bruising of egos and
competition.
And he said, but you know, you guys have been, the team that is playing with the team and working as a team, he think really bled over into the broadcast. I thought that was pretty interesting.
And it really did help that none of us knew what we were doing.
Right. Well, I mean, we were like holding hands in the dark.
Booth team, assemble!
Hey, Keith. What's up?
Oh, hi. Didn't see you there.
We've been here literally the entire time you have.
Last season was such a roller coaster.
I don't know if I can go through that again.
I mean, think about what you're asking, man.
What the hell are you asking, man? Will you follow me again?
I'm getting too old for this.
To the booth!
To the booth!
To the booth! Okay!
Gary, Keith, and Ron have been together for so long that it isn't just their baseball observations. They know each other's personal stories, their quirks, their habits, the backstories, the anecdotes, and by now, so too do fans. Those who watch regularly aren't just watching a baseball broadcast, they're visiting with their three guys who almost feel like family to them.
I'm sure as a Mets fan, other people have had the experience of people saying to you, oh, you're a Mets fan? I'm sorry. And then I go, but we have Gary, Keith, and Ron.
It's always playing in New York. The sky's falling. They've scored 3 runs the first 2 games against the Cubs, and everybody's in a panic. Not the Mets, everybody around. My advice would be the Mets, just get back to what got them here. Get off of Twitter, get rid of all the noise, focus on the remaining 19 games, the job that needs to be done.
It's the thumb that is cupped underneath the baseball that really makes the difference. He holds it with the seams now, guys. If you're home trying to work on your curveball with the seams, use that middle finger, keeps this finger up. But even more importantly, the horseshoe, you cup your thumb like that so you can pull down with the middle finger and jam it with your thumb. Pull and push. Best curveball you can ever have.
I, for one, don't like 3-man booths, but I make the exception with Gary, Keith, and Ron because they've pulled it off better than any 3-man booth has ever been able to in local sports television.
I think you can make a very strong case that Gary, Keith, and Ron are the best TV booth in baseball. Being as objective as I can, I couldn't put any booth ahead of Gary, Keith, and Ron.
I hear all the time when you're facing another good pitcher, and he will be today, one of the best in Steven Strasburg, that you don't really think about the other pitcher. Baloney. They are throwing next to each other. They're playing burnout at about 98 miles an hour, and they're both going to be ready for this game.
On the outside pitch, if he's out here, and the outside corner's here, he can't reach it out here. He's got to hit it here. I look at Lindsey, Ralph, and Bob Murphy. We have the pitcher in the booth of them in their Rheingold sport coats in our booth, and they were the originals, and I still have a hard time realizing that, hey, that's me. We're 18 years. We surpassed them this year in longevity. So it makes us part of Met history, part of the Met family.
Well, you know, I grew up listening to Lindsey Nelson, Bob Murphy, and Ralph Kiner. I mean, they were the sound of Mets baseball for my entire childhood. So it's almost unfathomable that we would surpass them. And I don't really feel as though we have, because those guys did so much more than we did. I mean, they were doing every inning of radio and television, just the 3 of them, the entire season.
In 1962, when the Mets began, I was 8 years old. I was 25 when Lindsey left and broke up that 3-man booth. And so I literally grew up with them, you know? They felt like family. And I think that that's what Gary, Keith, and Ron have been able to achieve. If they broke up tomorrow, the feelings that I have for Lindsey, Bob, and Ralph will be enjoyed for Gary, Keith, and Ron forever.
Oftentimes you don't realize when you're going through it that you are a part of something historic. And whether or not they understand it, think about it, or are willing to acknowledge it, I can. 100 years in the future, you'll think about and you'll hear about Lindsey, Bob, and Ralph, and Gary, Keith, and Ron. And that's pretty cool.
You know, the Mets didn't exist before those guys came along. They created the sound of Mets baseball.
That is kind of basically what we are. You know, we're just another generation down the road for a different generation of fans.
They are the best. We have just honestly tried to uphold the tradition they started, and that is that the Mets have always had really good announcers, starting with 3 of the best, and we tried to kind of continue that.